From the Main Report in Melbourne, Stephen Mayne. Now, let's talk a little bit about, Stephen Mayne, you've had a fair bit to say about the proposed Seven merger, the Stokes plan to merge Seven with Westrac. The Stokes caravan has been around to various capital cities to speak to investors, and the market will be focusing this coming week, on the outcome of the vote by Seven shareholders on the proposed $3.4 billion merger. Steve, what are your thoughts?
Well, if I'm a betting man, I think it will be voted down unless Kerry Stokes sweetens the offer. I think the valuation at the top end of the range for Westrac, and even things like the fact that several of the key Seven executives get to cash out their options from this deal. These are elements that institutions don't like, and I think institutions will look at this and simply say, do we need this? Do we need to fix Kerry Stokes's private debt issues, where he's got $1 billion of debt in his private company, and do we need to help him do that in a tax-effective way? And do we need to suddenly be a holding company, which is a bizarre combination of tractors and media? And I think that the institutions, on balance, having gone through the 690 pages of documentation that was released this week, will probably vote against it. But if that looks like happening, I think Stokes will sweeten the deal and will accept less new Channel 7 shares, because he wants this deal to happen, yet the institutions don't need it to happen. So they certainly have the stronger negotiating position as this comes down to the wire.
All right, well, it's interesting you say that, but the independent expert Deloitte has approved the merger as fair and values the deal in the range of $883 million to $1.034 billion. But there does seem to be some doubt about whether minority shareholders will see that there is value in this.
Well, have you ever seen an independent expert report declare something not to be fair and reasonable? I mean, sometimes I think that the institutional shareholders and the minorities should actually commission their own independent experts report rather than the company itself commissioning it. Now, Deloitte, obviously a good firm, and they've crunched the numbers, and you can make the argument. But there's a few things that are very troubling, like the Caterpillar franchise can be terminated with 90 days notice. So there's not a lot of certainty around that. And the other thing is that why would Channel 7
played that down as if that's not a worry?
Well, of course it's a worry. And the other one that people haven't really mentioned yet is that this new holding company can't be taken over, because Kerry Stokes has promised Caterpillar he will retain 60% of the business at least. So he literally can't sell it, because if he sells it to James Packer, he's breaching the licence deal. And so literally, Channel 7 shareholders, if they agree to this deal, they are kissing goodbye the notion of a takeover premium at some point in the future, because Kerry Stokes literally has agreed never to sell the Caterpillar franchise, or he risks losing it.
Stephen, it's interesting you mentioned about Seven executives. I mean, Mr Stokes will be a beneficiary of the deal, but Seven executives get the windfall gain, is that right, by converting their options into Seven shares after the deal is done? Although, to be fair, they will have to pay the exercise price of between $7 and $9, but it's been that particular aspect has been talked about, that it actually shortens their long-term incentives as executives, and they get to do it in a much shorter time frame.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, you are right that they're not comfortably in the money. So the likes of David Leckie and Bruce McWilliam and Peter Meakin, there's 7 million options in total, but these are meant to be a long-term incentive scheme. But this merger triggers the collapse of those options, and they can just take their shares straight away. Now, you're right, it's $50 million they'd have to pay, basically, and, they're only marginally in the money. Some of them are in, some of them are out. But, why do you have an incentive scheme and then you do this bizarre merger which just triggers the end of the executive incentive scheme? I mean, I can understand the executives wanting this, because what does David Leckie know about tractors in China and this sort of stuff? I mean, he doesn't want an incentive scheme which is driven by Pilbara tractor contracts. So I can understand him being annoyed, but the shareholders are looking at it and just saying, this is another one of the corporate governance bad points, and, do we need this? And I reckon they don't.
Okay, well, ASIC also was urging Seven or Mr Stokes to amend the merger. Now they want changes to be made to the documents, and it appeared, if the panel has any views on this, but it appeared that the corporate regulator was chastising them over parts of the draft scheme book, and that there were concerns that there was insufficient disclosure that the transaction involves, related parties. Now, Steve, is this something that they're going to have to take very strong notice of?
Well, you don't often see this. I mean, at the end of the day, ASIC does get to sign off on key takeover documents and prospectuses and things like this. And clearly they've actually arced up on a few issues, and, things like the related party deals, the costs of running the merged companies, the fact that holding companies often trade at a 35% discount to market, the disclosure around the Caterpillar franchise termination risks. It's good to see that the corporate plod has been out there, and similarly the judge who's been overseeing the process has also been making a few points and making comments about the fact that the independent directors have been indemnified if they're sued, which does happen a bit, but you don't like to see that sort of thing. So, I mean, good to see the courts and the plod out there ensuring that the 690 pages provide a very comprehensive and fair and balanced view on what, let's face it, is the most controversial related party deal we've seen in Australia for many years.